Elements here in Rhode Island that we must note, but Washington is, man, it's a fast pace right now.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
And this whole Senate confirmation situation with potential nuclear option, almost guaranteed at this point, may have, I don't know, some kind of diplomatic light at the end of the tunnel. Our guest, Professor Richard Arenberg from Brown University, has told me just prior to the taping of the show that he has at least had some conversation in Washington about this situation, and we'll note that. I'm going to include the professor in most of my conversation tonight anyway, so let's get to it. Thanks for tuning in on this Wednesday night, middle of the week. Time flies. This is it's just the same old nonsense. 38 Studios brief. The Attorney General has responded to the governor's petition of the court to ask for the release of the 38 Studios grand jury information. Here was Governor Raimondo's position on this a month or so ago.
At the end of the day, it's going to be the court that decides. I'm on the side of transparency, and I'm going to go to the court and say, let's release everything.
She wants to release everything because, well, she wants to release everything. All precursor or to avoid, I'm not sure which, a real independent investigation, which is what we absolutely need here in this state. The Attorney General argues in his brief, amongst other things, at first the grand jury never voted as to whether to bring charges, which is very provocative. Disturbing, actually. We're going to have to get some expertise on the grand jury about all this. Secondly, he points to cases where grand jury documents have been released, the tragedy of Jai Young shooting back in 2000, and of course the Station nightclub fire. And he points to those cases being different because, he says, they were fully investigated, in quotes. Well, where does that leave us, Mr. Attorney General? You're suggested that the state police and your office have fully investigated 38 Studios with this caveat of, well, if something comes up, we'll take a look into it. It doesn't make any sense. A lot of things the Attorney General does do not make sense. And so this is going to continue to be an economic black cloud and cultural black cloud and political black cloud for the state of Rhode Island. Just look at what's going on right now in Pawtucket. Now, the Red Sox organization there better come up with some kind of public statement about their own investment into that stadium. But I can promise you that the hue and cry from this public is going to be no more public money for projects that feel big, especially tied to baseball. Remember, 38 Studios was Curt Schilling's project. All because we don't trust anybody anymore. If we don't, the public's right to know, and I think the state's financial security in a lot of ways has a lot to do with the release of documents at 38 Studios and a finally called independent investigation on that project. This Attorney General seems to be completely out to lunch on this particular matter. I know the grand jury is a sanctified place. I know you got to protect witnesses. But in this particular case, this story is much too big. And there seems to be still too much being protected here. All right, speaking of our own national security, headlines here are all over the place. So this might be a good move. Steve Bannon has now been removed from the National Security Council, although the president's chief advisor will be able to sit in on some discussions of national security. The former national security advisor is in at least some, I don't know, political hot water. I don't think she's in any legal hot water for her, for the reporting that she, went through an unmasking process of some Trump organization folks. Reportedly, she never reported out on that at all to the intel community, kept it to herself, and I don't know why she has to answer for those questions other than it's a diversion on the Russian intervention thing. And then we've got North Korea firing ballistic missiles. Here's a roundup of what's going on.
This is a seat stolen.
Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley staged a marathon protest on the Senate floor overnight, calling on Republicans to delay the vote on Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch this week. This amid ongoing investigations into ties between President Trump's campaign and Russia.
Unacceptable that we're considering this nomination at this moment when there is a cloud over the presidency.
Part of those investigations involved the president's still unsubstantiated claims that President Obama wiretapped Trump Tower. On Tuesday, the president pointed the finger at the former president's national security advisor, Susan Rice, retweeting the link to a story suggesting she may have unmasked the names of Trump associates picked up during surveillance of foreign targets.
The effort to ask for the identity of an American citizen is necessary to understand the importance of an intelligence report in some instances.
White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer questioned whether Rice's motivation was political.
It depends on the purpose of why they were asking and what they were trying to accomplish.
As the investigations continue, reports have emerged that Russian spies tried to recruit former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page as an intelligence source 3 years before the campaign.
I wouldn't be surprised after all of this is said and done that some people end up in jail.
The White House insists the president has no relationship with Page and did not collude with Russia during the campaign.
You know, we blame Donald Trump for, aim, shoot, fire, aim. What's the wrong chronology there? Fire, aim, shoot. Anyway, speaking before he should, it's becoming habitual in Congress as well. I would say predicting criminality before hearings really flush out is bad behavior on all sides. Professor Arenberg is back with us and is a veteran of Washington. And we're going to save this for our next segment. But you've been down there doing some work on the Senate thing, huh?
Yes, I've been involved with a very small group of senators and former senators, bipartisan, in an effort, I have to characterize it as kind of a Hail Mary.
All right, well, hold your thought on that, because I want to hear all about the Hail Mary. In the meantime, your take on some of this. By the way, I should mention, as we do the show, when we record the show every day, early afternoon, President Trump has already told the New York Times that he thinks there might be criminal implications for Susan Rice. And he's also defended Bill O'Reilly, which is interesting, suggesting he should never have settled his sexual harassment lawsuits. I don't know that that makes the cut, or maybe even your reaction. Really? But it just goes to show every single time, and now we're getting world behavior to kind of heat up for the White House, that it just makes you cringe and wonder whether this president has any concept of what he's supposed to be doing in there.
It's not clear that he does. And, you know, the one thing he is a master at is diversion. I mean, he throws all of this stuff up, usually much of it without any substance behind it at all. And, you know, we all chase around after it, trying to talk about it. I mean, what shred of evidence is there that Susan Rice did anything that was illegal? I mean, even that unmasking process is, well, it's well established, and it doesn't connect to leaking in any way, and so there's no evidence.
Like she's being pulled over by the White House right now on the highway for doing 54 and a 55.
Right, and
that's what she's supposed to be involved in as a national security advisor.
Yeah, and conveniently, she was somewhat controversial when they were running their whole Benghazi investigation.
She lost her credibility.
And so talking to his base, you know, using Susan Rice as a scapegoat is just a valuable tool for him.
Yes, no doubt. I mean, she is a controversial figure, and people aren't going to rush to her immediate defense because she was part of that whole charade of Sunday morning talk show excuses for what happened in Benghazi.
And we would, you know, you would hope that the President of the United States at this point in time would be so focused on North Korea, China, Syria, that he wouldn't have time for, you know, all of this frivolity, really.
Yeah, no doubt. Listen, you wrote a good piece, not to go backwards, on the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Right now, speaking of Hail Marys, there's a lot of work going on with the Vice President in Washington trying to put that whole thing back together. It seems like some of this stealth work without a lot of headlines might actually be more productive. What's your take on that?
Well, I haven't seen any evidence that there's anything that could be really called progress. I mean, I think it's very much in their interest to give the impression that they haven't given up and that they're kind of, what the president said notwithstanding when he pulled the plug on the bill the first time. But until there's some...
Which he reversed 2 days later.
Until there's some evidence that somehow there's a way to put the moderate Republicans and the Freedom Caucus group people together and get them on board for some proposal, and that proposal would have any attractiveness at all to the American people and have any chance at all of surviving in the Senate, I'm very skeptical about that. And I think, as I wrote, I think this is the linchpin for his major legislative agenda, and that if this really does go down in flames, it's going to be extremely difficult to be successful on big issues like tax reform or infrastructure.
All right, when we come back, Syria, Senate hearings, lots. Stay with us. All right, we're going to bop around a little bit. Here's a headline from yesterday's horror in Syria, and our UN ambassador, I think, did a good job actually standing up and showing some of these photos to make sure everybody could see them at eye level today. Don't really have time to get into this too deeply, but wow, what a mess.
Tragic situation.
What do we do about this? I mean, this is so this chemical attack, 90%. Experts say 90% assuredness that it's Assad. You got to hold out that it might be ISIS, but why? You do all the equations. Do incidents like this spike, a renewed or a different game plan there? What do we do?
I think it defies planning, really, in a way. I mean, it's just it's absurd for the president to be pointing the finger at his predecessor, as if somehow that's connected to this situation. Somehow he's responsible for it, and it's not clear.
That's a punt. That's buying time, thinking,
right.
Oh, I don't know what we're going to do about this.
But doesn't it open the question? Well, okay, Mr. President, what are you going to do?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And of course, you wonder about what Russia's role is, because Russia is so now mixed into the Syria situation. And based on that, I should ask, because you were around the Iran-Contra process.
Yes.
You understand what these Russian intervention in the election hearings are all about, and what a mess that's turned out to be at the start.
Right.
And of course, the big question is whether or not there'll be immunity given to the former National Security Advisor, who was there for about 10 minutes, Michael Flynn. Lessons learned in Iran-Contra tell you that offering immunity could really screw up whatever real investigation is going on, correct?
Well, it may facilitate the congressional investigation, but it runs the risk of eventually screwing up a criminal prosecution if there is one.
Oliver North's situation is an example.
Exactly right. He was convicted. He was convicted in federal court, but the appeals court overturned it on the grounds that that the jury was unfairly prejudiced by being exposed to his congressional testimony. And at the time that the Iran-Contra Committee was making the decision about whether to give immunity to North, they knew that was a danger. It really was a balance. You have to remember there was this dark cloud, maybe even darker than we see today, over the Reagan White House. Reagan was basically unable to do much, and the committee felt it had a responsibility to help the public to understand what were the facts, what had happened. And North was an absolute linchpin for finding that information out.
Flynn's legal counsel certainly has studied history and knows that it could be an investment in a potential relief of, doing any jail time. We'll see if Congress takes the bait a second time.
Yeah,
right?
well, it's hard to evaluate in the absence of knowing what the proffer is. In other words, his lawyers.
Here's what we're going to give you.
His lawyers are going to tell, and with great specificity, are going to tell the committee investigators and presumably the FBI investigators what it is that Flynn will tell them. And then on the basis of that, they need to decide whether that warrants giving him immunity. It would suggest that normally that would only happen if you're interested in getting him to give testimony that's going to go to somebody higher up. He's the national security advisor, so there's not many people up there.
Right, exactly. When we come back, the professor's been meddling in some good work in Washington on the Senate process for the Supreme Court. Stay with us. So kind of at our press time early in the afternoon, here's the latest on the Gorsuch confirmation process.
Hamilton is rolling over in his grave.
Frustrated by their Democratic colleagues, Republicans on the Judiciary Committee say they will not allow a filibuster on the nomination of Judge Neil Gorsuch.
There has never been a successful partisan filibuster of a Supreme Court nominee, and we will not start this week.
It takes 60 votes to stop a filibuster and end debate on a nomination. With 52 votes in the Senate, Republicans have fallen short of securing support from 8 Democrats and now have said they will trigger the nuclear option, which will blow up the rules and do away with filibusters for Supreme Court nominees.
He'll be a great justice.
Back in February, President Trump said he would support the break in precedent.
But if we end up with that gridlock, I would say, if you can, Mitch, go nuclear.
I have fulfilled my constitutional duty.
Democrats say President Trump shouldn't be filling the vacancy, blasting Republicans for refusing to confirm President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, last year.
All I can say is what goes around comes around.
But they are also concerned about the long-term implications of going nuclear.
I think a number of my colleagues have grave misgivings about the destructive repercussions for decades to come.
Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley says he has no concerns about changing the rules.
I'm going to do whatever it takes to get Gorsuch on the Supreme Court.
Well, before you tell me what you've been doing, how historically and for the future integrity of the constitutional process is this decision to go nuclear?
It's enormous.
Why?
Well, with respect to the Supreme Court, looking at that specifically, historically, the role of the existence of that supermajority potential requirement. Now, typically, Supreme Court justices haven't been filibustered, and typically they've gotten more than 60 votes. But we're in a highly polarized situation.
We've had a couple 52-48s. I mean, Judge Thomas was a close call.
But they weren't filibustered.
Right, and I don't think people understand
that was a matter
that
of
part
restraint.
Of the process.
You know, that was a matter of restraint by senators. But
Right.
what's important about that, I want to get that out, what's important about that super majority requirement is every president in picking Supreme Court justices has had to consider that he might have to get some of the minority to go along with the notion that this pick is in the mainstream, and that even though they might not like them, they're willing to allow it to go forward.
If we don't have, Professor, if we don't have the Garland thing, if we don't have the Merrick Garland problem, I don't see how this thing gets as heated as it does.
Well, yeah, well, things are pretty polarized, but I think you're right. I think the justification for many of the Democrats for filibustering is not so much the ideology of the nominee,
correct,
but it's the fact that they view the seat as stolen, and they don't want to cooperate.
Most Americans don't understand simply because you just don't pay attention to this or you don't remember your civics lessons. But this cloture vote, the 60 votes that end the filibuster, get it to a vote.
Right.
That's what you don't want to see. You don't want to see that removed. The only way that gets
because
removed.
If you take that away, presidents in the future will be able to go as political, as ideological as they want, as pure as they want, because as long as their party controls the Senate, they'll be able to put who they want on the court.
And it's important that people know that a senator can vote for cloture and not vote for the nominee.
Absolutely.
And we've seen that in the past. So really quick, we only have a few minutes. What are you doing in Washington? You've been working with some senators. Do you think there's anything that's going to be brokered here?
Well, I hope so. I'm not sure there's any real traction. I described it as a kind of a Hail Mary pass, and I just think it's so important that we've got to try. And there are members of the Republican caucus who do not want to invoke the nuclear option.
John McCain being one of them.
Yeah, but he'll vote for it. In spite of the fact he said anybody who thinks it's a good idea is a numbskull and an idiot. And there are Democrats in the Democratic caucus, beside the ones who have said that they're going to vote for cloture, who don't want to press this filibuster because they know it's not going to succeed. Because of the nuclear option, right. And even if it did succeed, from their perspective, Trump would turn around and appoint somebody worse.
So let me make it clear. Brown professor with vast Washington experience has been down there. You've been in the middle of this conversation. How many senators are we talking about, and what progress do you think you've made?
A very small group, it's hard for me to talk about a number. I can't talk about names because it's in the nature of the circumstance that unless this compromise works, you don't want to be labeled with having reached for a compromise.
Why are you involved?
Just because I wrote a book called Defending the Filibuster, and so I'm recognizable. I spent 34 years on Capitol Hill. So I know a number of senators on both sides and former senators, and so we've just put together a proposal, and we'll see where it goes.
What's the proposal?
Well, the proposal involves Gorsuch getting the 60 votes to get an up or down vote. It involves rolling back the previous damage that was done by the nuclear option when the Democrats used it, so that the 60 vote requirement will be back there for circuit court and district court judges, and it would protect the supermajority requirement for Supreme Court judges.
Well, if you pull all that off, it's a miracle.
It will be.
Chances of? Give me a percentage real quick.
Very small. I would say 8%.
You never know. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Thanks for the visit.
Good.
Final word when we come back. Stay with us. 8% chances are not 0% chances. That would be some package if the Democrats and Republicans were able to come around to that settlement on the Gorsuch nomination. It wouldn't just resolve this case, but resolve a better way of doing business in Washington altogether. More on the perils of the Constitution, this process, and more on tomorrow's program. Don't forget to tune in weekdays 3 to 6 on WPRO tomorrow afternoon. Thanks for watching. Good night.